Wyoming Territory. 1879, the first shot cracked through the valley just as the sun broke over the Grand Tetons, scattering a flock of blackbirds into the pale sky. Kendra Vaughn dropped to her knees in the tall grass, one arm thrown protectively around her youngest, while the other clutched the rusted rifle that had misfired again. She was out of powder. Again. "Stay down," she whispered, pulling Lucy tighter against her side. The little girl, no more than 6, buried her face in Kendra's threadbare skirts. Levi, her older brother, crouched behind her with his fists clenched and jaw trembling, 10 years old and trying not to cry. They had been walking for 2 days since the wagon broke outside Jackson Hole. No horse, no food left, and no shelter. Just 3 people and a broken wheel, so when the man on horseback came riding over the ridge, rifle drawn and dust curling off his coat, Kendra did not know whether to run or beg. "Put the gun down, lady," the cowboy said, voice calm but firm. He leaned forward in the saddle, eyes narrowing as he took in the children at her sides. "I'm not here to hurt you." Kendra stood slowly, dirt streaking her apron. "They're mine," she said, her voice hoarse from wind and worry, "and I don't need your help." "I think you do," he said. He dismounted in one smooth motion and stepped forward, holding the reins of a paint horse. "Name's Owen Drenner. You're a long way from anywhere safe." Kendra hesitated, eyes flicking past him to the open hills. "We were headed to Fort Washakie. My husband, he left 6 months ago. Said he'd send for us. Never did." Owen's gaze softened. "He abandoned you," she didn't answer, but the silence gave her away. "What about your folks?" he asked gently. "No one left." She straightened her shoulders. "We'll be fine." Owen took off his hat, knuckling back a strand of dark hair. "Lady, no offense, but you're not making it another day out here. Let me help." She looked down at Lucy, whose lips were blue from the cold, and Levi, who had not spoken in hours. Her pride strangled her like a rope, but her children came first. "I do not know you," she said quietly. "Then get to know me while I fix your wagon," Owen said. "You can ride back with me to my place. I have food, shelter, and a barn full of tools. You can decide what comes next after your little ones get warm." Kendra stared at him, searching for a lie, a trick, anything in his face that would make this another mistake. But all she saw was a man who looked like he had been alone too long to fake kindness. "You have a wife?" she asked. "No," he said with a short shake of his head. She nodded once. "Then I suppose we will take the help. For them." He turned toward the wagon, and that was the first time Kendra saw the way he moved with quiet purpose, like a man who could build a house but would never raise his voice inside it. By nightfall, the wagon wheel was mended, and the 3 of them were tucked into the guest room of Owen's small ranch house. It sat near the Gros Ventre River, tucked between cottonwoods and backed by a red ridge. The house was plain but clean and warm. The kids had eaten fresh bread and stew, and Lucy had fallen asleep curled up in a blanket that smelled like cedar. Kendra sat at the edge of the porch, arms wrapped around herself as the stars blinked into view. She heard the door creak behind her, and Owen stepped out, handing her a mug of coffee. "You did not have to fix the wagon," she said, eyes on the darkness beyond the trees. "You did not have to trust me," he said, settling into the chair beside her. She took a sip. "I am not used to this. Kindness without a price." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "You do not owe me anything, Kendra." Her name sounded different in his voice, not sharp, not tired, just real. "I have nothing left to give," she whispered. "No land, no money. I am just a burden with 2 mouths to feed." Owen looked at her, his voice low. "You are not a burden," she shook her head. "You do not know what I have lost. Tell me." Her hands tightened around the mug. "My husband left when Lucy was sick, said he could not handle it. Took the last of our savings and the horse, never wrote back. My father died of fever last spring, and my mother passed 2 winters before that. All I had left was the wagon, the children, and a stretch of road that nearly killed us." Owen leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "And still, you walked 2 days through the wild to keep them alive. That is not weakness, Kendra, that is strength." She blinked hard, turning her face away. "You are kind to say that." "I am not saying it to be kind," he said softly. Then, almost too quiet to hear, "I am saying it because it is true." Silence stretched between them, heavy with all the things neither had said in years. "I do not know if I will ever be enough for them," she admitted, voice cracking. "Some days I cannot even look in the mirror." Owen's brow furrowed as he turned to face her. "Kendra," he said, voice steady, "you are already my everything." She sucked in a breath. "You do not mean that, you barely know me." "I know enough," he said. "I know what I see. You carried your children across the wilderness because no one else would. You faced down a stranger with a broken rifle and stood your ground. And tonight, you sat out here alone instead of asking for comfort." Her throat tightened. "I have lived on this land 6 years," he said. "Built every piece of this house by hand, but it has never felt full until tonight." Kendra set the mug down. Her fingers brushed his, tentative, unsure, but he did not pull away. "I do not know how to start again," she whispered. "You already did," he said. And when she looked at him, really looked at him, his tanned skin, his steady eyes, the way he watched her like she was worth watching, something inside her cracked open. Not all the way. Not yet. But it was a start. The next morning came pale and cold, with frost edging the window panes and a brittle hush over the land. Kendra stood by the stove in her stocking feet, warming a pan of cornmeal mush while Lucy and Levy still slept under quilts Owen had laid out the night before. The house smelled faintly of juniper wood and the bacon he'd fried before heading out to check the cattle. The silence inside was strange. Not empty like it had been in the wagon after days of walking, but full in a different way, like the walls held breath. She stirred the pot slowly, watching the steam rise. Her hands, red from scrubbing and wind, had stopped trembling. That was new. The door opened with a soft creak and Owen stepped inside, his coat dusted with frost, boots heavy with thawing mud. He nodded once, then towed his boots off near the door. "South fence is holding," he said, stepping into the warmth. "Snow's not set in too deep yet. Might hold till solstice." Kendra nodded. "You want some?" He glanced at the pot. "Smells better than what I've been making." "I doubt that." She hesitated. "I can do more than cook, you know. I can sew, keep a house. I even helped my father lay roof shingles once when the barn blew in." "I believe you." He sat at the table, folding his hands. "You don't have to prove anything here." "I'm not trying to prove," she said, setting a bowl in front of him. "Just trying to earn my stay." "You already have," he said, lifting his spoon. "But if you want to keep busy, I've got a coop needs mending. Chickens haven't laid right since the last hail." She poured 2 more bowls and carried them to where the children stirred. Lucy blinked up at her, hair mussed and cheek pressed against the quilt. "Is it still snowing?" "No, baby, just cold." Kendra tucked a strand of hair behind Lucy's ear. Levy sat up slower, still wary. He looked at Owen, then at the bowl in his hands, then back again. "You got any books?" he asked suddenly. Owen raised a brow. "I do, not many. Some old almanacs, a Bible, and a book on birds my ma sent me once." Levy didn't answer, but the way he took the first bite without being told said more than words. Later, while the children played outside near the stump pile, Kendra helped Owen patch the coop. He handed her nails without asking if she knew how to use them, and she didn't need to explain that she did. The wire was rusted in places, and one of the hens had gone half wild, but they worked side by side in quiet rhythm, the way people do who understand the value of silence. "You grew up out here?" she asked, fitting a slat of wood along the frame. "No, Missouri, came west after my brother died. Didn't have much to keep me there after." She looked over at him, the hammer paused mid-swing. "You were close," he shrugged, though the motion looked like it cost him something. "He was my older brother. Always said the West was where men went to start over. I followed him out. He caught fever in Laramie and didn't make it past the first spring." She didn't offer comfort. "Just handed him another nail, buried him under a cottonwood," he said. "Bought this land after, figured if I was going to be alone, might as well be somewhere honest." Kendra nodded. "That makes sense." They worked without speaking for a while. The wind picked up, threading through the trees with a low whistle. "You planning to stay long?" he asked finally, not looking at her. "I don't know," she said. I don't want to overstay, you haven't. I just... She stood, brushing her hands on her skirt. I didn't expect to find a place that felt still, like the world wasn't falling apart every time I blinked. Owen leaned against the coupe's frame, arms crossed. I know that feeling. She looked toward the house, where smoke curled from the chimney. Lucy asked this morning if this was home now. What you tell her? I said I didn't know yet. He nodded. Fair answer. She turned back to him, but I'd like to know, soon. Their eyes met, steady and unguarded. That's up to you, he said. I've got room. And I don't mean just the house. He didn't touch her, didn't move closer, just let the words sit there like an offering. I'm not ready for promises, she said. I'm not asking for any, he said. Just time, same as you gave your children. She tilted her head, narrowing her eyes slightly. You sure about that? I don't say things I don't mean. She studied his face, the weathered lines and sun-browned skin, the set of his jaw that spoke of long winters and early mornings. Then she gave the smallest nod. I'll help with supper, she said, turning toward the house. He watched her go, but didn't follow. Inside, the children's laughter drifted faintly through the walls, and for the first time in a long while, Kendra didn't feel like a stranger in her own skin. A week passed, then another, marked by low skies and the hush of early snow settling into the hollows. Owen's land felt tucked in, like a breath held through winter. Kendra worked as if she'd always been there, patching a tear in the barn's roof with shingles Owen had salvaged, laying fresh straw in the loft where the wind had crept in through a busted slat. Every task steadied her hands, gave her purpose beyond survival. The children adjusted faster than she expected. Levy helped Owen with the morning feed, and Lucy had taken to shadowing the hens, naming each one and reporting which had laid and which hadn't, as though the birds answered to her. Kendra watched them from the kitchen window one morning, the wood stove warm against her back, and felt something like stillness settle inside her. She found Owen in the tack shed that afternoon, oiling the worn leather of a bridle. He didn't look up when she stepped inside, just kept his focus on the strap stretched across his knee. You never told me what you did before this, she said, fingers brushing the door frame. Didn't think it mattered, he replied, voice even. It does to me. He set the bridle aside and wiped his hands on a rag. I was a blacksmith's apprentice. Back east before the war, learned to shoe horses, mend iron, fix anything that could take heat. She stepped further in, the packed dirt soft under her boots. You fought, he nodded. Union side, infantry, lost more friends than I can count, came back to a town that didn't remember my name. She didn't say she understood, she just picked up the bridle and checked the stitching on the brow band. You never talk about it, not much use in it, he said. The past doesn't feed a man's stock or fix his fences. No, but it follows you. He looked at her then, slow and quiet, like he was weighing whether to speak again. My brother enlisted first. I followed him out of spite, if I'm honest. Said he wasn't going to die without me watching. He paused. Turns out I did watch, just couldn't stop it. She set the bridle down gently and sat on the overturned crate across from him. Do you think about him when you're out riding? Every day, she nodded once. I think of my father when I'm mending things. He used to say a woman's worth shows at the seams where things hold or tear. Owen was quiet for a moment. I'd say your seams hold just fine. She gave a small breath, almost a laugh, but not quite. Sometimes I feel like I'm sewn together with whatever I could find. Bits of grief, stubborn thread, and the will not to fall apart in front of my children. He leaned forward, forearms on his knees. And still you've held. She met his gaze, something flickering between them that hadn't needed words until now. I keep waiting for this to go wrong, she said. For you to change your mind. I won't. You say that like it's simple. It is, he said. I know what I see when I look at you. You don't have to keep proving anything, not to me. She looked down at her hands. I don't know how to be wanted without having to earn it. You don't have to be anything but yourself. His voice softened. You already are everything, her breath caught. Not from surprise, but from the way the truth of it settled low and deep. Like a weight she didn't realize she'd been aching to set down, she stood slowly, walked to the shed door, then paused with her hand on the frame. Outside, the wind had settled. The light was thinning toward evening and the smell of pine smoke drifted from the chimney. She turned back to him. "You built this place alone." "I did. I'd like to stay," she said. "Not because I have to or because you fixed the wagon. But because when I sit at your table I don't feel like I'm disappearing." His brow furrowed, not from doubt but something nearer to hope. "You'd be welcome," he said. "I want to earn my place here," she added. "You already have." She stepped back out into the cold, her shoulders square, her steps sure. Behind her, she heard the sound of him rising, the brush of leather against wood, the quiet click of the bridle being hung back in its place. That night, Levy fell asleep reading aloud from Owen's bird book while Lucy curled beside Kendra on the settee, thumb tucked under her chin. The oil lamp flickered low, and outside, snow began to fall in soft, deliberate flakes. Kendra watched Owen as he leaned against the hearth, arms crossed, face lit gold by the firelight. He caught her looking, and the corner of his mouth lifted not in jest, but in quiet recognition. And in that soft, firelit silence, something rooted between them, not rushed, not spoken, but real and steady, like the start of a life that would hold. The river thawed early that spring. By late March, water pushed under the ice in slow, gleaming currents, and the cottonwoods along the bank bristled with buds like pale fists. Owen had cleared the last of the winter brush from the fence-line that morning, and now the sun hung low behind the ridge, casting long lines of gold across the pasture. Kendra stood at the edge of the garden plot with her sleeves rolled to the elbow, hands sunk in cold earth. She'd already turned 2 rows and marked seeds for spring onions and beans, her movements precise, focused. Lucy played nearby with a hand-carved doll Owen had whittled from pine scrap, while Levy helped mend a broken gate down by the creek. "You're planting early," Owen said, stepping up beside her with his hat in one hand. "The ground's ready," she said, brushing dirt from her palms. "I can feel it." He watched her a moment. "You always know things like that?" "Not always," she said, "but I grew up on timing. My father used to say the land gives you one chance to listen before it stops speaking." Owen crouched beside her, running a hand through the soil. "You ever think about putting down roots here, real ones?" She didn't answer right away. The river murmured beyond the trees, and Lucy's quiet humming drifted through the stillness. "I think about what it would mean," she said at last. "And I never had anything that stayed, not the house I was born in, not the first land we tried to claim. Not even the name I was given. I married it away." "You didn't lose yourself with it." She looked at him, brows drawn. "How do you know?" "Because I've seen what's left. And it's more than most people ever start with." She searched his face, the way the light caught in the creases at the corners of his eyes, the steadiness that never asked anything but gave room for everything. "I still carry the weight of what I couldn't fix," she said. "The days I failed them." "You didn't fail them," her voice lowered. "I thought about leaving them once, just walking into the trees and not coming back. I didn't, but the thought was real." Owen didn't flinch. He sat back on his heels and said, "Then you stayed. And that's what matters." She pressed her hands to her thighs, grounding herself in the feel of the dirt. "I don't want to be a burden to you. You're not. You say that easily. I say it because I've lived alone long enough to know what empty really looks like. And you," he reached down, lifting one of her hands rough with work and cold, "you bring more than you take." She let him hold it. "The children are happy here," she said. "They can stay as long as they want," he said. "And so can you." Kendra looked down the slope where Levy stood beside the repaired gate, testing the hinge with careful pressure. He hadn't asked to leave, not once. "I don't want to be taken in out of pity," she said. Owen's hand tightened slightly around hers. "I never pitied you, not once. I saw strength. I saw someone who didn't quit. I'm not an easy woman. I'm not asking for easy." Her voice wavered. "What are you asking for? A life with you, if you'll have me." She looked at him, then really looked. And whatever had kept her wary, whatever voice in her that whispered she'd never be enough, quieted. "All right," she said. He nodded, not in triumph, but in quiet understanding. "Then we'll start with the garden," he said. And after that, we'll build what we need." The sun dipped behind the ridge and the chill returned to the air, but neither of them moved. Not yet. The ground was still beneath them, and for the first time in either of their lives, the future no longer felt like something to outrun. By the first week of May, the last of the snow had melted from the gullies. The earth turned soft and fragrant with new shoots, and the hills behind the house carried the low murmur of running water. That morning, Kendra walked the fence line with a basket under her arm, collecting wild onion and yarrow where they grew in the ditches. Her skirts brushed against the young grass as she moved, and for once her mind was not troubled by what might come next. Back at the house, Levy was repairing the handle of the water bucket with Owen's help, both of them bent over the workbench in the barn with quiet concentration. Lucy sat on the porch steps, threading small stones into a bit of twine, her tongue pressed between her teeth in careful focus. Kendra stepped into the kitchen, setting her basket down by the washbasin. The air inside held the scent of fresh lye soap and the bread she'd set to rise earlier. She'd meant to start boiling laundry, but instead stood still for a moment, letting the quiet surround her. Owen came in not long after, wiping his hands on a rag. He leaned against the doorway, watching her without speaking until she turned. "You ever think on what you'd have done different?" she asked. He tilted his head. "You mean before all this?" "No, I mean with your life. If you'd had a choice in it." He folded the rag, set it on the counter. "I used to think I'd run a smithy in some quiet town, maybe with a dog that followed me everywhere and neighbors who knew my name but not my business. And now I think I was meant to build a home out here. Just didn't know who I was building it for until you and the children came walking up that ridge." She turned to face him fully. "You ever want your own family? Before, I never pictured it clearly. But I know what it feels like now when I look at you." Her voice dropped. "I never thought I'd be loved again." "You are." He stepped closer, and she didn't flinch, not from doubt, nor from the weight of what lay behind them. He reached out and took her hand, his thumb brushing the base of her palm. "I want to marry you, Kendra, not to fix anything. Just to put a name to what we already are." She stared at him, the air between them warm with flower dust and sunlight. "You sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." Her reply came without hesitation. "Then yes." They married the next Sunday beneath the cottonwoods near the river. Levy wore a shirt Owen had outgrown as a boy, and Lucy carried a bundle of juniper branches tied with string. There was no preacher nearby, but Owen wrote a vow in his own hand, and Kendra answered with one of her own, quiet and steady. He built her a cedar trunk for their room, carved with wildflowers and the initials of each of them, even Lucy and Levy. She filled it with quilts, the children's drawings, and the letters she wrote him in her own time, ones she never gave him but kept folded in linen, her way of holding the softness of their days. The land grew with them. By late summer, the garden stretched in green rows, and the coop held more hens than it had in years. Levy learned to track deer without spooking them, and Lucy could name every plant behind the house. Kendra made soap with tallow from the fall butchering and hung it to cure in the shade. Sometimes in the evenings, Owen would sit beside the stove and read aloud from the bird book, while Kendra mended seams by lamplight and the children lay on the braided rug, half listening. He never raised his voice, never left her wondering if she was too much or not enough. And she, in turn, gave him a home that breathed around him, a life woven with care. There were hard days, sickness once, and a broken axle, but they met each one with the same quiet strength they'd built together from the start. Not with grand gestures, but with a hand held steady, a warm plate set down wordlessly, a place at the table kept open always. Years passed. Levy grew solid and tall, took to horse training like he'd been born for it. Lucy kept her love for small things, bees, wildflowers, the way frost feathered on windows. They stayed. Not because they had nowhere else to go, but because they had found what had once seemed impossible, a place where they were not just surviving but held. And when Kendra stood beside Owen in the fields each spring, her hands sunk into the thawed earth, She no longer feared the world turning beneath her. She had chosen this life, and it had chosen her back.